Welcome back to Data Science at Home podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into the numbers behind narratives. I'm your host, Francesco, and today we are talking about something that's really been keeping me up at night, which, in my personal opinion, is the massive disconnect between Silicon Valley's obsession with defense tech startups, and I would say it's not just a Silicon Valley thing anymore. But I'm not here alone, and I would like to do this with Mr. Jonas Singer. Hi, Jonas, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me.
That's great. It's great to have you here. Now, Jonas, we all know that you are the CEO and founder of Vector Group. But of course, before getting into the details of this, I think, very interesting episode, it would be nice to, let us know what you do for a living, what Vector Group is, and what's your background.
Yeah, absolutely fine. So Vector Group, in a sense, at the moment, is a really interesting combination out of two major things. We have Vector Homes, which essentially imagine Uber for construction, for the pre-construction phase. And the more interesting bit is Vector Labs, where we have a bunch of crazy material scientists which can do stuff you can't even imagine with nanomaterials, so it's advanced materials. And we have product lines from everything from advanced sensors, printed electronic sensors, to fire retardants, to novel insulation materials. But this is like kind of my daily business. This is how I earn my money. But I guess the reason why I'm sitting here today is I many years ago by now developed this, well, healthy or unhealthy obsession about defense. So far so that I even did a PhD at the German Military University in Munich, where I dived very deep into dual-use technologies and their funding, so VC, PE funding cycles. And I researched about how we can leverage private capital to better grow and scale dual-use tech companies. And out of this PhD, I also created a podcast, a defense innovation podcast. So if anyone is interested, the most episodes are in German, though. Some of them are in English. But yeah, that's I guess why I'm here, in very short.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. And of course, we'll report some of the links that, the relevant links to this episode on in the show notes of the on the official webpage, datascienceathome.com. Now, what a coincidence, Jonas, because today we're going to talk about defense and VC and, defense tech, mil tech, and the
Wow.
state of VC world. So, it just happened. Nothing was planned, I
Yeah.
believe.
I just showed up here and, I thought we'd just have a coffee chat. But
That's great and fun. All right, let's start with the elephant in the room, as they say. Now, there are things that are going on in the VC world, and definitely in the world of defense. They have to do with the world of VC, and they have to do with the fact that many companies out there, essentially startups, they are all promising one thing. They're promising to be the next DJI of defense, or the Tesla of warfare, and they combine the big names with the battlefield, battleground, and all that stuff, right? So, as a matter of fact, and I know that we don't want to give numbers, but these are facts. In fact, at least the ones that we can count, about between 20 and 40% of, for example, Ukraine's FPV drones actually hit their targets. And it's also known that, for example, Russia's electronic warfare capabilities are rapidly neutralizing these systems more and more, which is normal. It's a typical evolution of things, right? So the question is, are VCs funding uh, elaborate remote control toys, or is there data showing that these investments will actually survive contact with sophisticated electronic warfare for this case?
well, so maybe to start at the very beginning, what you said. So everyone's promising to be the next Tesla and all that stuff. I think living in the VC bubble, there's a totally normal thing because, to be honest, every startup has to promise that because otherwise the VCs wouldn't give them any money. So VCs love to be lied at. That's also something not everyone says, but it's true. And everyone shows on their slide deck the hockey stick the VC wants to see, although everyone knows it's just numbers they fiddle around until they show the graph you want to see. Now, back to your numbers there. You said 20 to 40% hit. Well, yeah, that is true, and it is the reason for that is there are many reasons. You already said electronic warfare, and so GPS data is jammed, so you fly purely on visual data, and that is really, really difficult with a delay, which most of them simply have. So the percentage there is fair, but it's also you need to be aware you are in highly congested areas. So it's not like flying around with your drone in your garden, in your backyard. That is that. Also, you have to give a little bit more context there, I feel like, because although media and it makes a great story, it makes a great LinkedIn post, whatever, likes to glorify drones. But if you then actually speak to the people at the front lines and you speak to them and ask about how are many of these drones used, they're oftentimes used as for like a double tap. What I mean by that, they're used to give already damaged tank or stuff like this the final strike, or they are used on stationary targets. So we have to differentiate there a little bit. It's not like this super dynamic thing and they're flying around and they're attacking all of these driving things. That happens as well. Yeah, we know all of these videos, but this is not the vast majority of the use of drones in Ukraine. Now coming back to the to the actual question. Well, I think it's a very, very difficult question, and if I would know, then bloody hell, I could make a lot of money. But yes, I think there's a fair share of lots of money is being thrown at a hype, and we will also guaranteed see massive consolidation. I mean, Ukraine right now has 600 drone companies. What do you think a market consolidation will look like? I mean, the first top 10 will be bought, yeah? Mm-hmm. But who wants to have drone company number 11, 12, 50, 120? No one. So a lot of money will be lost because the typical exit and in this industry, purely because of the industry structure, you would expect a merger as the most natural, most logic way of an exit. Will never happen. Then on top of that, one thing I see is that there's lots and lots of venture capital tourism. What I mean by that? What I mean by that is essentially that lots of VCs, which classically or in the last years or decades have invested in all sorts of things, biotech, you name it. Now, because it's trendy, jump on the fence. But oftentimes you see they don't do their homework. They don't really understand what it takes to be successful in such a complex field of defense. And thereby I see lots of people making investments which everyone who has really deep industry knowledge knows they won't be successful if we only want to evaluate it based on return. Now, what I don't want to do here right now is just make a bashing of VCs which invest into Ukraine, because we also have to be very aware that there are more and more people which just invest in Ukraine because these people need money to just keep their game and their fight up. So not everyone invests with the thought, oh, I'm going to have a massive return of investment there. So there are people which just are investing because it's the right thing to do. And I absolutely believe in that. Does that answer your question, at least remotely?
It does. No. And it's. I'm very glad that you actually mentioned that. First, the VC tourism is indeed a thing, and then, of course, there is another thing to add, in my opinion, which is uh, the deep engineering capabilities that they put in action. And I want to refer again to the Ukrainian situation because that's what we have, at least related to drones and drone companies. They look to me more just like assembly workshops rather than deep engineering stuff. And in my personal opinion, that's because there is an emergency, there is a crisis, and usually that type of deep research can be done in peacetime because you can iterate and you have time, in fact, to do that. And so
Yeah,
probably this reflects, now that you mentioned that, it makes sense actually because it reflects the financial aspect. It goes together with the research aspect. Like, guys, we are in danger here. We need to do something that does the job. Yeah, it's not we're not gonna write an academic paper about it, but who cares, right? And that
exactly.
reflected in the VC, in VC terms, means we need money to build even toy drones. Why not, if they can carry a grenade and do the job? You know, the,
Exactly. One thing I've never in my life seen in such a way is the focus the Ukrainians have.
mm,
The focus on impact. And I've had many conversations with people from all over the world. But when I'm in Ukraine and I speak with people, I they are so laser focused and they don't worry about venture capital returns. They don't worry about IP. They don't worry about regulation. They don't worry about anything. They worry about impact. As you said, because there's this emergency. It's a very different situation. Someone sitting in God knows where, Germany, UK, US. You cannot compare that. And for them, it's crystal clear. It is about impact, and this is all they care about. And this is an absolute superpower when it comes to actually making something. And yeah, I totally agree with what you said. It is more an assembly shop, and it is more low tech, which obviously influences the potential uplifts for venture capital investments if you only want to look at it from a financial point of view. But that's what they need. That's what they need. And they don't have time to develop the next super fancy AI, yada, yada, yada. If you look at it today, drones, UGVs, UAVs, they mostly are, remote controlled. Why? Because also the front line is evolving in such a fast way. You have no chance to do this in some way really automated, or you don't get the right data at the right amount to cope with that. And also the innovation cycles, they are so fast. They're so fast. You're talking about innovation cycles of 2 to 4 weeks. And this is not 2 to 4 weeks for a concept. This is 2 to 4 weeks from, oh, damn it, this new challenge came out, or this new jamming, or this new whatever the Russians are doing. In 2 to 4 weeks, they have a new version of the drone or the tool, whatever they use, on the front lines in action. And that makes it also, from the point of view, from a startup point of view, extremely challenging, because VC, or the vast majority of companies and businesses, they're used to, I put R&D investment in,
yeah,
I develop something over 2-3 years, whatever, and then I have a long period where I can essentially benefit from the investment I've made. And this is where you make your money. And this is also where the venture capitalist makes his money back. Yeah. But with this extreme pressure, even if you have the best drone right now, it could be completely redundant in 2 months' time.
yeah.
Completely.
You read my mind, because that was exactly my question. Like, who's going to explain to the VCs, to the current VCs, that, hey, this is a very different product you are putting money at? This is not something that you have some kind of competitive advantage that will last years. This is something that is valid now. Probably next week you're going to be obsolete and your money is going to, disappear. Who's going to explain that? Do VCs know this, or how?
That's
Yeah,
It comes down to what I said before. There's lots of tourists out there because it's trendy to invest in defense, but they don't do their homework. They don't get the right experts in, which have studied this field for years and years and years, and understand what the limitations are. And I wouldn't always say that your money is gone. It's just a massive pressure for the teams, for the startups, to keep up this massive pressure of development. And it can be that people keep up this for a prolonged period of time. But I'm just saying the risk profile is a completely different one than what VCs are used to in already super risky areas, right? Like venture capital already is an unbelievable risky game. And we all know of 20 investments, 18 go tits up, right? And then they're gone. And now introduce pressure for rapid evolving warfare systems.
Yeah,
your risk profile just exploded it through the roof,
absolutely.
and almost no one knows how to deal with it.
Yeah. No, it's very true. There is another problem which is more technical. If you are funding 50 different drone startups, uh, presumably they all have, almost all of them have incompatible architectures. Because these are things that you don't think of. Uh, Frameworks, compatibility, scaling, scalability. You don't think about this. You just do it, as you just said. Now, this can be a massive problem, don't you think? Because you're just recreating the same fragmentation problem at a much more expensive level this time.
Not could. This is a massive problem. In fact, it's such a big problem that um, a really big part of all of the drones that Europe, for example, sends towards Ukraine are completely unusable. They're unusable for the Ukrainians, or they are more work the Ukrainians have to put in to make these systems usable than it is for them to produce it themselves. And this is something, people don't think about, but this is the reality. You think like, oh, we're the best. Yeah, we just sent 1,000 drones to Ukraine, which they can absolutely do nothing with it, because the bureaucracy in the process you needed to get approval to ship these over borders, to get them to Ukraine, takes 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Yeah, and by the moment they arrive there, the evolution might have been, astronomical. And so, again, yes, everyone means well, but the reality of the battlefield, unfortunately, looks very different. And sometimes they cannot be used, sometimes they can be used, but only with a massive amount of resources put into it. And you have to keep in mind, Ukraine is under massive resource pressure on every single dimension you can imagine. And also specifically human beings. So just manpower, because then you need guys, technicians, to fiddle around on these drones they just got, to change components, to change, electronics and this and this and that, which oftentimes they simply don't have. I mean, we know how the war looks, right? It's just like every single resource matters.
Yeah, it's very true. Um, I would like to bring the conversation towards, uncomfortable waters, to say the
Sure.
least. Well, throwing some numbers here, and of course, we're going to report some of this research. Of course, the numbers that we can measure, the things that we can measure. There is approximately 60%, at least, to be very conservative, of components in Russian drones, and about 80% of components in Ukrainian drones that come from China, right? So Chinese companies like DJI was one of the most, if not the most, drone manufacturer in the world as we speak. Uh, this Chinese company maintained this massive scale through commercial markets, of course, while American defense startups chase, for example, Pentagon contracts with, I don't know, 18-month sales cycles, right? So my question is like, first of all, what's the take on for VCs? Like, do they know that they are, heavily dependent, in fact, on Chinese components? And what is their strategy, knowing these numbers?
Yeah, so I will have to say that by now, Ukraine realized that, because Ukraine have been in situations where China randomly says that one electronic component is dual use and they stop exporting it. And so they had their supply chains collapsing before. And so if you look at the current numbers, they look very different. Like Ukraine is very self-sufficient by now. Not completely self-sufficient. Obviously, there's still stuff. I think nowadays, just look into Europe. It's like Europe without China, it's non-existing. Just look at critical raw materials. Look at microelectronics. There's no way to get across or to work without China. But if you look at Europe, then Ukraine is by far the most advanced ones, because they paid the heavy price when China stopped exporting. So they found ways to get it done without them, or with much less relying on Chinese components. Now, when it comes to general awareness, I feel like the awareness is there, and also in the last couple of months, I see a massive, massive awareness shift also within the industry, even civil companies. But the other thing is that no one has answers to it. No one has answers to it because the vast majority of people, and even in the defense industry, if you look at the primes and their supply chains, they don't understand their supply chains. And if I say they don't understand their supply chains, I mean it. They understand tier 1 and they maybe understand tier 2, and then it's gone. So everyone knows the known unknowns, critical raw materials or minerals, magnets, microelectronics, chips, you name it. But supply chains nowadays are so complex that you might have hundreds, if not thousands, of unknown choke points, hidden choke points. And no one has a solution for that at the moment. And then the next point is, we could say, well, we just start producing everything in Europe. Okay, well, then start getting your mines up and running. The average time, don't quote me on that. I mean, you're quoting me because it's recorded, but the average time to get a mine approved and up and running is, I believe, something like 10 to 18 years in Europe. Jeez. So good luck if you need something in a year's time. Then look into the next stage. So you have now your ore, which you get out of the mine, but you need an industry which makes this ore into the actual metal or product. Well, yet again, China has 90+% of that industry to turn the raw materials into usable materials. And even if you say now, oh, well, there's other sources like, Africa. Well, look closer, please. If you look into Africa, you will find that round about 8 to 9 out of 10 mines are under control of Chinese-controlled government companies. So, they've been very smart in that sense of make an entire world rely on them. And Europe or even the US was foolish enough to think, oh yeah, that's great, I got all of these cheap materials. Yeah, but you are also, you need it like a drug addict needs its crack. You can't go without it.
Yeah, that was playing 5D chess for a decade or more. That was China. This was not prepared overnight. This was
long-term game. They're playing the long-term game while everyone was just trying to ride the wave of globalization and cheap imported resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are winning. I mean, long-term game always pays back at some point.
100%, no doubts.
All right. Well, there are many folks out there. I got another one on LinkedIn yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago. I don't remember. I try to forget. Every time you speak about, against some kind of trend, you get accused, you get criticized heavily, especially online these days.
Tell me about it.
If you try to put down a rational conclusion about something and say, okay, I'm going against the trend, but the trend, it's kind of wrong, in my opinion, and I'm telling you why. So why this? Because I want to get to the point of saying many believe that the Ukraine's model works, right? And in my opinion, it doesn't. Because it works only in when there is urgency. Okay, and when there is battlefield testing, right? But in peacetime, that model might not be compatible, or the other way around. So that's why I say the Ukraine's scenario is unique in a way. And when I wrote this on LinkedIn, you can't imagine the wave of accusations and critiques that I received. But I want to ask you, what do you think? I mean, what's your opinion, of course, about Ukraine's model? Because most of the portfolio companies have never had their products actually used in combat, right? And even now we have like this deep tech startups that where you have software engineers who watched Top Gun a couple of times, and they think they can, they know the battlefield very well. Uh, this is the people many times we're dealing with. And as you move the battlefield towards AI and deep tech, or the other way around, deep tech towards the battlefield, you're actually mixing these two populations of people who probably, actually, very likely never saw a gun in their life.
Yeah. So first, um, I mean, for everyone listening in, check out my LinkedIn and check out some of the comment sections there, because I only make these really outrageous posts. So if someone is in for a laugh, go on my page,
We're
check
gonna,
out some comments.
we're gonna add that thread to the show notes of the episode. Sure.
So that's the first thing. The second thing, I would have to ask, like, what do you mean specifically if you say the Ukrainian model doesn't work? What specific aspect do you mean by the Ukrainian model?
Well, the fact that you have a solution, and this relatively shallow is a bad word. I don't want to say that. There is focus, there is technology, of course, but it's like a rudimentary thing that has to work, right? This approach to science and to research and to applied research is typical of the Ukraine, which is not just Ukraine. It's just a nation that is at war and doesn't have a long horizon to think, to iterate on things, right? And that's why, in my opinion, that model of fast iteration and throw away what you get because we have a better solution for next week is something that works only in such context. While what I'm seeing from the observations of people online is like, wow, let's do like Ukraine because this is going to be the new way of building deep tech for mil tech, right? And that's what I think that they are wrong. My personal opinion is that they are not actually elaborating on that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, fundamentally, I would say, for me, it comes down to what I like to call the engineer's problem. Yeah. What I mean by that, the engineer's problem for me is that someone has a cool technology and they develop a cool product or anything like that, and then they try to find a problem to solve with it.
Yes.
But usually the order is they develop in their little, in their basement and develop there for 2-3 years, and then they have this product and like, okay, damn it, no one wants it, so I need to find the right product, the right problem. But actually, what you should be doing,
security, by the way, works like that.
yeah. What you should be doing is make an outrageous amount of calls and conversations with the people actually using it. I'm not going to say that we don't need people which have no military background, because we do. We can simply not afford to only say, oh yeah, that's on the military guys to develop solutions there. We need every single brain we can get at the moment. That is very clear. And yeah, I think absolutely essential, take in the learnings and really understand what is the problem and then develop a solution. But at the same time, I agree, we're not in the same situation in Europe or in other countries other than Ukraine. So we cannot try to get going with shallow solutions, as you just called it before. I would call it low tech in comparison to deep tech, simply because we're in a different situation. And also, something I want to make very, very clear, we all know that the next war never looks like the last war. Never. Yeah? And it's a quite dangerous thing. One maybe a little bit more outside, and please stop me if I ramble too far away from your question, but one thing I also like to make very clear is that many militaries in Europe have, in the last decades, only had asymmetric warfare. What do I mean by that? They had warfares, or have been involved in wars, where it was extremely unfair, so to say. Imagine the German military in Iraq, or the US military in Iraq. So, fighting against a bunch of farmers with AKs, and then you have a military. And this is essentially what, in the last decades, their training has evolved around. But look at the battlefield today in Ukraine, Ukraine versus Russia. It's a symmetric war. And no one of us, our armies, other than maybe the Americans, are prepared for that at all. Like, at all. And if you look into their training and all that stuff, they still don't have any meaningful, real training which is relevant to the current situation. But sorry, I stop here now because that was not part of your question. But there's so much. I could talk about this stuff for 2 weeks straight. It's dangerous.
I noticed that. Yeah, I don't think we can keep that long. At least not the recording. Jokes
No.
apart, this is very interesting, and I also get absorbed by even listening to people like yourself, because nobody has the right answer. These are all opinions that many of them make sense actually, so they're all plausible ones. And yes, the symmetric warfare is unique in these times. I would like to go back actually to the exit strategy reality, just to bring back the conversation towards the VC
Sure.
world in deep tech. Um, let's talk about exits, all right? Because that's, what, of course, a VC, that's the metric that a VC has to take into account, obviously. Now, consider the big players, right? Lockheed, Radon, Boeing. Um, these are possibly all the potential acquirers of this massive number of startups that you know get created overnight. Now the problem is, well, the problem is a good thing for them that these companies have decades of systems integration experience, existing production lines. These are companies that have been created for this, exactly for this type of scenarios. Now, why would they pay venture multiples for your startups instead of just hiring the engineering teams and building solutions in house? What?
Why is
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, why is fairly simple. If you speak to a large prime right now, they say, we are here to build big complex platforms. We are not here for the fast evolving, rapid innovation. And they are very well aware that they themselves cannot keep up with the speed of these younger companies. This is the only reason. This is the only reason they are aware that they have created such bureaucratic and hierarchy monsters that they will never be able to keep up speed. That's the reason why they would acquire. And this is why you see, even in these large ones, you see, certainly in Europe, like all of a sudden, like every single one of these large primes has a CVC fund all of a sudden. Why? Because they start buying in strategically, which, companies which pay into their long-term strategy and their long-term product lines. That's the reason. So it's all about speed, and they are aware by now that they cannot keep up with the speed.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Jonas, of course, I would like to ask you another dozen questions, but we are running out of time, unfortunately. So let me go with my final question, which is more about uh, the fact that um, it's about impact. In fact, um, it's not just solving the problem overnight, the problem you have today or next week. It's more about uh, making the military more effective in the long
Mm-hmm.
by knowing all the things that we know, the integration challenges, the competition from China's industrial base, the scaling problems, all these things that we have said and discussed in this episode, even though briefly. How, or do you think these solutions will make the military more effective in the long term? Like in 10 years from now, will there be, well, 10 years probably is a big horizon, but in a few years, will there be a military product that takes advantage from what these folks are doing now?
I think the answer is absolutely yes. I can imagine a future where a drone almost gets a standard equipment of every soldier, like a hand grenade or a radio. So I think we will absolutely see impact there without any doubt. The question is, though, in what way? Because actually the larger problem I see is the way our militaries and the procurement actually work at the moment. This is the much bigger challenge when it comes to the future and how they will evolve, how they will develop industrial capabilities and capacities, is the much, much larger issue on a long-term meta scale, as well as how governments and governmental leaders will go about drawing out a strategy. Because believe it or not, in many, many European countries, there is no strategy. There's no strategy towards how do we want to fight wars? How do we want to defend ourselves? Yeah. What are the technological capabilities we're working towards? And it's this weird situation where the government or the politicians think, the industry is going to fix it. And the industry says, well, we need guidance. We need to know where to go. Because for the industry, I don't make any investment in any technology or a manufacturing facility if I don't know where the journey is going towards. You can't blame the industry, certainly, because they're businesses. They have shareholders, which they need to make happy. So I think in many of these scenarios, you will see it will work or not work because of politics, because of structures and laws in the countries, and simply because of speed. Yeah? Because what you see in lots of European countries now as well, all of a sudden there's so much money there. There's so much money, like so much depth is used to invest into defense right now. But the vast majority of that money goes into the primes, 80-90% goes into the primes, rather than what you should actually invest in is the front end of innovation, because this is the stuff you're going to need in 10 years or in 5 years. So it all goes, or the vast majority goes into legacy tech, and lots of governments are still procuring like we would be in absolute total peacetime. So they buy an X amount of a weapon system, but they still don't demand delivery times. So, the defense industry is used to, all 20 years the government comes around and buys these 200 tanks from me, and then no one really cares if we deliver them in 3 years, in 5 years, 7 years. In fact, it's better for us because then we can charge additional abortive costs and yada, yada, yada. But lots of regulation and systems are still running as if Europe would be in peacetime. Yeah. And that will not work. Absolutely. It won't.
Absolutely. I hope that this, of course, put some order in this chaos. At the beginning, of course, things are always a bit chaotic everywhere. And I hope we as Europeans at least learn a lesson for the next 20 years because, these things take time. Jonas, this was great. These type of conversations are always too short, unfortunately. At least that's how I feel they are. As I repeat myself, we're going to report some of the links that Jonas is going to share, some of the conversation and the other things that we have discussed in this episode on the official website, datascienceathome.com. And of course, if you're working in defense tech, whether as a founder, investor, or even Pentagon program manager, I don't think you can do that, but okay, just get in touch. But in any case, jokes apart, I challenge you to read one particular article, Goncharuk's full article on one of the zines that I consider kind of the best in the world, warontherocks.com. And so, Jonas, this was great. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.